1897 in Aurora, Texas. I have the news article in front of me, but let me give you the gist of what happened. The morning of April 17th, 1897, a airship of some type crash landed at a farm in Aurora, Texas, knocking out a windmill. To the surprise of the local people there who found the craft, they basically stated that it was nothing they had ever seen. It was not of this earth. They found an alien body that was badly mutilated from the crash. They even had a funeral for the alien, I think, the next day at the cemetery. The alien was buried in the cemetery in Aurora, Texas. Now, I have the actual newspaper article in front of me, and it reads this. At 6 o'clock this morning, the early risers of Aurora were astonished to the sudden appearance of an airship, which has been sailing through the country, was traveling due north and much nearer the earth than ever before. Evidently, some of the machinery was out of order, for it was making a speed of only 10 to 12 miles an hour and gradually getting toward the earth. It sailed directly over the public square, and when it reached the north part of the town, collided with the tower of Judge Proctor's windmill and went to pieces with a terrific explosion, scattering debris over several acres of ground, wrecking the windmill and water tank, and destroying the judge's flower garden. The pilot of the ship is supposed to have been the only one on board, and while his remains are badly disfigured, enough of the original has been picked up to show that he was not an inhabitant of this world. Mr. T.J. Weems, the United States Single Service Officer at this place and an authority on astronomy, gives it his opinion that he was a native of the planet Mars. Okay, that's kind of strange that they would just automatically claim he's from Mars. All right. Papers found on his person evidently record of his travels, written in some unknown hieroglyphics that cannot be deciphered. The ship was too badly wrecked to form any conclusion as its construction or motive power. It was built of an unknown metal resembling somewhat of a mixture of aluminum and silver, and it must have weighed several tons. The town is full of people today who are viewing the wreck and gathering specimens of the strange metal from the debris. The pilot's funeral will take place at noon tomorrow, and it was written by S.E. Hayden. This is an original newspaper article that was in the April 17th, 1897 Aurora newspaper.
And they're serious. It's not, any type of, how do I put it? It's so innocent. There's no fear involved. There's no even air of humor. They're dead serious. They're reporting this the way you might report a single passenger plane crashing. It's just amazing to read that.
It is, that there is a public record of this happening in the newspaper. There have been stories over the years that S.E. Hayden perpetrated a hoax. However, MUFON did an investigation back in, when was it, 1976, I want to say? Yeah, 1976, they did an investigation. They went to the town to find out if there were any living survivors. And they actually talked to two people. One was a 10-year-old boy back in 1897, and the other, I think, was a 15-year-old girl. And they got eyewitness accounts from both of these people. The boy said he was working on his father's farm when this thing crash landed, and the girl, I think she was 15 at the time, had made mention that this crash was the talk of the town. And the biggest thing they talked about was the inhabitant of the craft not being a human from this planet. So I find that interesting, that in 1897, this article was posted in a local newspaper, and it was not a hoax. It was not a joke.
Well, the other thing, we keep going back to this. There were no human aircrafts at that time.
Well, yeah, the at Kitty Hawk, the first flight took place in 1903, and I think it lasted maybe 12 or 13 seconds. But this was the first airplane that Wilbur and Orville Wright had built. So this happened in 1897, 4 or 5 years before that ever happened?
Yeah.
6 years? Yeah.
Even if, let's go way out there, even if some human beings secretly did discover how to build an aircraft in that time, the 1890s. It's a bicycle with wings on it. It wouldn't be nothing metallic. It wouldn't be anything. I mean, the Wright brothers thing, that's what it was. It was a fucking bicycle with wings on it. It wasn't a metallic structure. It wasn't something that would be flying at that rate of speed. You're talking a good 70, 80 years before we achieve that. So, I mean, come on. It just speaks for itself.
Now, to make things even more clear, folks, reportedly, the wreckage from the crash site was dumped into a nearby well located under the damaged windmill. Some of the alien wreckage ended up in the grave with the alleged alien. Adding to the mystery is the story of Mr. Brawley Oates, who purchased Judge Proctor's property around 1945. Oates cleaned out the debris from the well in order to use it as a water source, but later developed an extremely severe case of arthritis, which he claimed to be the result of contaminated water from the wreckage dumped into the well. As a result, Oates sealed up the concrete slab and placed an outbuilding on top of the slab. According to this writing, the slab was done in 1957. So I find that interesting that this man buys the property, he excavates the well, and he touches parts of this thing, and the water gives him severe arthritis. In fact, his hand had went inflamed. It looked horrible. That's got to tell you there's some sort of radiation from this stuff. Again, what had radiation in 1897? I can't think of many things, folks.
Well, it's either radiation or something I want to get into with you a little bit later, microorganisms. I mean, it's one or the other. But, I mean, obviously, no natural sources of radiation back then. That's before we even learned how to split the atom or manipulating radioactive materials. So, again, and as far as I know, it's really something out of this world, because radiation poisoning messes you up a lot more than that. Severe arthritis, that's something you develop over decades. You don't just get arthritis within a short period of time. So, come on. Obviously, something was going on.
Now, there is, I'm looking at this page too, there is a report, as far as a hoax is concerned. Supposedly, this lady that was investigating it, who was it? Etta Peggs claimed that Hayden had fabricated the entire story, saying that Hayden wrote it as a joke to bring interest to Aurora. The railroad bypassed us and the town was dying, says Peggs. She claimed that Judge Proctor never operated a windmill on his property, a statement later refuted as part of the UFO Hunters episode, which found the base of the windmill constructed around the well. So even the hoax theory has been put to rest by the UFO Hunters and MUFON, who've investigated this very thoroughly.
Well, I mean, if you're going to perpetrate a hoax to draw people into the town, that's an interesting thing to come up with in your head all of a sudden. Well, we're not going to say we found gold here. We're not going to say we, found some type of precious metal here that can bring jobs or whatever. No, we're going to say aliens landed. Really?
Exactly. Getting back to those two eyewitnesses that I spoke of earlier, MUFON actually did do an investigation. I think I said 74. It was actually 1973. The investigation was led by Bill Case, an aviation writer for the Dallas Times-Herald and the Texas State Director of MUFON. MUFON uncovered two eyewitnesses to the crash. Mary Evans, who was a 15-year-old at the time, told of how her parents went to the crash site. They forbade her from going, and the discovery of the alien body. Charlie Stevens, who was age 10, told how he saw the airship trailing smoke as it headed north toward Aurora. He wanted to see what happened, but his father made him finish the chores. He told how his father went to the town the next day and saw the wreckage from the crash. MUFON investigated the Aurora cemetery and uncovered a grave marker that appeared to show a flying saucer of some sort on the gravestone, as well as readings from its metal detector. MUFON asked for permission to exhume the site, but the Cemetery Association declined permission. After the MUFON investigation, as in like the very next day, they went back to the gravesite before they were going to leave town. Believe this or not, folks, the grave had been exhumed. The headstone was gone. Any evidence that pertained to an alien buried in that cemetery disappeared the next day after MUFON asked to exhume the body.
It doesn't get any clearer than that.
Tell me that's not a cover-up. Tell me that if there was nothing in that grave, then why wasn't MUFON given the opportunity to go in there and exhume it? Because there was something in the grave. I mean, who would mysteriously dig up the damn thing at 2 o'clock in the morning and take any evidence that was there? The U.S. government.
It almost makes you regret that MUFON didn't just say to hell with it and show up there at 11 p.m. and do it without permission. Who knows how that would have changed the course of history? I mean, how does the gravestone disappear? Probably somebody at the cemetery contacted who they were supposed to contact and said, these guys are snooping around. We need to do something. Had to be.
Yeah, the mysterious marker was disappeared from the cemetery and a 3-inch pipe was placed into the ground. MUFON's metal detector no longer picked up metal readings from the grave. Thus, it was presumed the metal had been removed from the grave. MUFON's report eventually stated the evidence was inconclusive, but did not rule out the possibility of a hoax. In other words, they're saying, well, they came, they checked it, the grave's gone, there's no evidence, maybe it's a hoax. If it's a hoax, somebody went through an extraordinary turn of events to orchestrate the hoax. Let's put it that way. To me, the smoking gun is the grave was looted, that it was exhumed, and it was gone. The evidence no longer exists. I don't think this was a hoax. Personally, that's my opinion. I don't think it was a hoax.
Well, if it was a hoax, why would you care so much time later? When MUFON showed up there, how long had it been? Why would you suddenly care now about covering up a hoax? Big deal. A hoax was perpetrated 60, 70 years ago. Well, no one's going to care. But somebody obviously didn't want them to find what was in that grave. I mean, if they had went in the grave and it was a mannequin in the side of someone's car and they did it just for it to be a hoax, would you really give a fuck that much longer? Who cares?
But it would have been proven to be a hoax is the point.
Yeah, but again, who cares? I mean, it's just like if it was 5 years later, 10 years later, you wouldn't want to be embarrassed. Most of the people involved with it are dead. Who cares? That to me really goes to prove that there was something there that they really didn't want people to find. It was a lot more than them worrying about MUFON proving it was a hoax. It was more than worrying MUFON was going to find something.
Exactly. But like I said, draw your own conclusions, folks. This is the first story we decided to cover, the 1897 Aurora, Texas incident. And like I said, there was a grave site that was exhumed by somebody before MUFON could go and, they were denied permission, and the next day it was gone. So to me, it doesn't get much more clear than that. But just my opinion, it wasn't a hoax.
Yeah, I mean, trailing smoke. Well, not only weren't there any flying machines from humans back then, but there was nothing that would use a combustible engine that would trail smoke. I mean, it's just too crazy. It's too reminiscent of, a modern plane crash happening before planes were invented. So it was obviously a species that was ahead of us as far as flight goes, because like I said, we were still fucking with pedals and wood.
Well, I think, my personal opinion, I think that alien beings have been visiting this planet for thousands of years. I think that the early Egyptians and the pyramids were inspired and built by extraterrestrials, because it fascinates me that, this technology was used to build the pyramids. And then if we were so advanced back then, how come, it didn't seem like we evolved from the pyramids? You're going to tell me that, millions of slaves carried these big ass rocks on their backs or helped push them on rollers. And then how did they stack them? Do you think that a million slaves pick up a 1-ton block, all at once? It just doesn't make sense. When you look at how the pyramids were built and the tools that they allegedly had, it doesn't make sense.
The thing that bugged me out the most was some hieroglyphics that they discovered of literally people pointing up at shapes in the sky. You see these depictions of these ancient people, and they're pointing up, and you follow their finger, and there are things that look very much like flying saucers.
But see, not only are they pointing up to things in the sky, even the ancient Native Americans and the Mayans all have depicted in these cave drawings or these these hieroglyphic. I can't remember what they call them. For the Mayans, they're not hieroglyphics, but the drawings that they have are of extraterrestrial-looking beings with the big eyes, and to me, that's the gods they worshipped. They weren't actually gods. They were ancient aliens, advanced extraterrestrials, who for some reason or another have been visiting this planet for thousands of years.
Well, and even the pyramids of Giza, astronomers have, if you look at the stars, you can go back in time and know where they were millions of years ago, thousands of years ago, how some of the pyramids lined up directly with certain constellations. Now, you mean to tell me not only, let's take your theory, how they built them, first of all, but built them with such fucking precision that they're like completely and utterly aligned with certain, freaking stars in the sky. I think architectures today would have a hell of a time trying to do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at the pyramids, for example, the Great Pyramid and the surrounding pyramids and all the buildings around that are literally, if you put a picture of the constellation Sirius, the Three Kings, it's in the same position as those stars. Like, you can't tell me that ancient man just looked up and said, hey, you know what? I just feel like building pyramids today. I'm going to go and I'm going to, get all these Jewish slaves that we have, all 2 million of them. We're going to go out in the desert. We're going to mine some rock. We're going to put them on rollers and we're going to make these slaves, tow this rock, and then we're going to have them pick them up and we're going to build these pyramids. And we're going to make them geometrically perfect on each side, the same circumference. It's going to be a perfect construction because I just feel like doing it, and I just think I'm going to model the star systems. I mean, the ancient Mayans and the Egyptians, they knew the stars. How did they know the stars? You can't just tell me they looked up one day and said, hey, that's pretty cool. And then they're going to start tracking it over the years. And they knew what everything was. They were told that was Sirius. Their gods came from Sirius. It just doesn't, I mean, when you look at it from that perspective, how can you not think that would be the case? I mean, look, there are 1 billion galaxies in this universe. You're going to tell me we're the only signs of life out there? We're the only intelligent life on a planet? No. And if we can now do space travel, mind you, we still have, the training wheels on. We're not, going to different star systems. But if we're able to advance and we're able to do it, then what's to say a civilization that's been around longer than human beings didn't finally get to the point where they could go interstellar travel and go to different galaxies or find a way to warp space-time? It's theoretically possible.
Well, I mean, the other thing that you have to know, and this is just for our listeners who the astronomical explanation of it, galaxies are just simply big clusters of billions and billions of stars. And ours is the Milky Way. And our sun is just one of billions. If even a tenth of those billion stars in our galaxy have planets around them, you're still talking billions and billions of planets. And you want to tell me, oh, let's see, out of maybe 100 quadrillion planets in the universe, this is the only one that has life?
And a lot of the people, that are doing the astronomy, scientists say, well, here's a planet they found one, Pt.1, which is bigger than Earth, but it's very similar to Earth, as far as its composition, as far as the water land masses. And they think it's, a planet that could be inhabitable by Earthlings, that we could inhabit that planet. Not only do I think that there's intelligent life out there, but I think there's different types of life. Not every kind of life necessarily has to live on the same, requirements that we do. Maybe there's a race of beings out there that lives off carbon dioxide. There's bacteria that can live in volcanic water. So, that to me says that why should I believe that beings are just like us and have to live on the same type of, planet that we do? To me, it just seems to me like if there's going to be life there are ways that life will propagate.
Well, you know what almost killed life on our planet when it first got started?
What's
the
that?
Development of oxygen in the air. To most common forms of life, oxygen is a poison. But life on Earth developed to breathe it because that's all we had. So if you have an atmosphere of, let's say, not sulfur, anything. Let's say you have an atmosphere of hydrogen. Well, why can't a creature develop the type of lungs to breathe hydrogen? I mean, shit, fish breathe water. We can't.
Well, we can for 9 months.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. It's true. You switch to oxygen breathing as soon as you're born. It's something to think about.
It is interesting.